My full name is Robert Timothy John Rosebrough. Nobody calls me that. My mom used to call me Robert Timothy when I was in trouble. And there were 6 kids, and she'd do that with all the children. You know, your first name, your middle name, then your punishment coming after that, I guess, or you're being grounded. I was grounded most of my life, I think, as a child. You had to earn your way out of the grounding. It seemed kind of strange. We had Christmas less than 2 months ago today. 25th of December. This is 25th of February, and tomorrow's Lent. The story of the Father's love in the conception and birth of Jesus is not just something to remember as like a vacation long ago, but rather as the ongoing mystery of this Jesus' incarnation in his people, especially in the sacrament of matrimony. The Father and the Spirit express their love made flesh in Jesus, and Jesus has chosen to reveal the depth of that intimacy in your marriage to your beloved spouse. Your love and the expression of that love with each other and others is his presence in our midst. You can't see it. Others can taste it, touch it, and be washed in the cascading abundance of his goodness, that we who are affected by your living that sacrament will want to draw closer to his joy and his glory. I remember when I was walking down the street, I was used to run, I guess it was, in the old days, back in the St. Mark's Parish in the inner city. I'd run down Academy, down to maybe Minerva, or to Ridge, and go up to Kings Highway, and go around Will Center, go down about another couple blocks, and come around, and probably 2 or 3 miles. And one day I was running down, and this guy said, "Hey, priest!" And his guy name is Bill Montgomery, found his name later. He said, "I want what that gal next door has." What do you mean? Well, she's been baptized and belongs to your church, and she's a whole different person. I want what she's got. I said, "Well, we can talk about that. I want it. Give it to me." Well, that's the kind of thing couples who live their sacrament give to us. We want what you got, which is God's presence in your life. I have tasted in his incarnation in so many couples like you that nourish me and give meaning to my life. You release joy, hope, love, and strength in your daily living. And you argue, and you hurt each other, and yet you forgive and heal, and show the loving compassion of a God who yearns to share the intimacy and unity that the Father, Son, and Spirit have. I treasure your sacrament in the year 2020, when the sacrament is being bombarded by so many forces that want to tear you apart and tear you apart from each other. As a Catholic priest, I promise to fan the flames of your love as your passion chaplain. I got that moniker back in 1991. Somebody said, "Father, you're fanning our flame. You're the passion chaplain." And I think I've taken ownership of that for the last, I've been doing this since 1973 in all kinds of ways with Marriage Encounter. I've had over 500 marriages and probably prepared over 800 couples for marriage. Give me a little thing to say. And the couples have taught me. I didn't teach myself. I listen well, and I watch well. But about my story about how I got to where I am now, retired at St. Innsbruck, it only has a golf course, 10,000 acres of woods, all the deer you want to kill or play with, because you can't kill them, 110 lakes. But in 1973, I made the Marriage Encounter in the March 23rd to 25th. Some of you had brochures on the tables there. I didn't want to go. Father Ed Schramm, those people might know Ed. Father Ed Schramm was ordained this with me. Ed was from Wentzville. And he and I were supposed to go on vacation in August. And we had a 10-day vacation lined up at my friends of Adirondacks down in Lake the Ozarks. And Ed's called me up about a week ahead of time and said, you know, I'm not going to go to that vacation. I'm going to go on a weekend. I'll catch up with you later. I was not happy. I worked hard that summer for a vacation. And I said, he says, why don't you go with me? I said, no, that marriage stuff, you just go ahead. My sister made it. She said, it was great. I said, that's fine. Go get Father Pat Malone from Wichita, another classmate of ours. We're close together. He got him. They went. I went on vacation by myself. Didn't like it. Kind of dumb. You know how you get stubborn as a mule. Then it was after me for the next 5 or 6 months. And then finally, St. Louis had another weekend in March of 1973. I just got back from a ski vacation. And pastors don't want priests to go away from the parish. You know, I just got back on that Sunday afternoon. Ed called me the following Tuesday or Wednesday and said, Rosy, can you make the marriage encounter in March? It's all set for you. I said, Ed, you know, I just got back from vacation and the pastor wouldn't want me to go. Ask him. Well, instead of lying, I went to ask him. He said, great idea. Why don't you go? That's not what you want to hear from a pastor. And I went with my radio, tennis racket, tennis shoes, swimming trunks, and about 3 other things. They never got out of the bag. And the most profound experience, I guess, and Jim Krings and I, most people may know Jim Krings, who died a few years ago. And he and I, Jim was the head trip, you know, a good intellectual. And he and I were mashed together for the weekend. We sat there like 4 bums in the log from Friday night through the first talk on Saturday morning. And we're kind of observers on a retreat, which is real good to have somebody observing you, not really involved, engaged. So this gal named Norma Pulowski, who was one of the presenters with her husband Ray, comes up to us as we finished ready to start the second session that morning. She says, I'm going to kick you in the ass. You know? She said, these couples are working their butts off. You sit there gawking and just looking at them from the outside. Why don't you get your act together and do something about that? I was in shock, but they knocked us off of our tushes. And what I saw the next few talks that evening and the next morning, most powerful example of good theology of the sacrament of matrimony. I became a Pied Piper of that experience since 1973, 47 years and counting. I worked in that ministry, some of the other things jumped off of that parish renewal experiences back in the late 70s, early 80s, Barnabas weekends for young adults, and then back to Mary's Encounter in 91. Most special gift I've ever seen. All 6 of us kids made the experience. My mom, who was a widow at the age of, I guess she was 46 when my dad died in 1959, she became our greatest spokesperson for Mary's Encounter. She'd say, my kids make it, what's wrong with you? And she just talked to anybody. Said, you know, I saw what it did for my children. I want your relationship to be strong like that. What a special gift. Out of this context of working with the Marriage Encounter Ministries for many years and many couples that I worked with across the country giving weekends, I'd like to share some stories. And the stories are different aspects of married life that people have told me about, if I witnessed, and want to share with you that might kind of spark something inside of you. And maybe if something hits you, just write it down somewhere that you can kind of keep a track of that. I remember I was down in Old Mines, Missouri, St. Joachim and St. Joseph, and Father Schramm was down there for 4 years, and then Father Jim Mall for 4 years, and I came after them. And Marriage Encounter was kind of sprawling across the diocese. And I got this young couple named Ed and Stephanie to be prepared for engaged couples, to help prepare for marriage. And they've been doing it 2 or 3 times already. And all of a sudden, one Sunday night, they called me about 9 o'clock, and Stephanie says, Rosy, we're a sacrament. We're a sacrament. I said, yes. No, you don't understand. We're a sacrament. And the thought struck me that although we have the matrimony, we know there's a sacrament in our heads, in maybe our minds, but sometimes we don't become conscious of what that sacrament is until all of a sudden something triggers that. Retreats do that, am I right? Somehow something you've been living on for a long time, take it for granted, and you move along, and all of a sudden it's a burning bush moment. She said, Rosy, the love that I have for Ed and his love for me, we can't see it because we're living it, but we're a sacrament. And they shared that with that couple that night, and there's overwhelming tears. Wow. We are a sacrament. I remember I was at a convention back in 1974, 74, 75, in New York. I think it was one of the, I don't know, it's Fordham or one of those colleges, or St. John's University. And we had 1,000 couples there, about 1,000 couples or so, for making it was the training for leadership. And there's about 110 priests, 120 priests. And the Bishop Boudreau was our leader from the bishop's moderator. And we're walking in procession from upstairs down into the altar area through the people. All of a sudden there was applause. Applause. It was earth-shaking. We all had goose pimples on our necks and our shoulders, beaming and red blushing as the people were applauding. We walked into the very front of and kissed the altar, and then Bishop Boudreau came to the microphone, and he said, priests, that was not for you. It was the people hungering for the Eucharist. That's what they're applauding. You're the gift of that, but they're applauding the Eucharist. The people, the laity, the couples have always hungered, and they draw from you, and they're calling to be a priest. It's not for you alone. In the same spirit, we call from you the sacrament of matrimony. Wow. We call forth from you, and you fan the flame. I remember Bob and Sue Capstick. I fell in love with them when I was about 19 years old, a seminarian in college. And I became friends with them. They were involved in the Christian family movement in the parish of St. Mary's in Bridgeton, where I grew up after I got kidnapped from Texas. My mom and dad took me with them from downtown Pasadena, and became the members of that parish. And Bob and Sue and a couple other people were in the parish were involved in a small circle of Christian family movement people. And they met once or twice a month, I guess. And I fell in love with them, so I became a part of their family. I never forget, I had a couple of the seminarians with me one night, on a Saturday night. As we walked in, Sue answered the door, and we walked in and went back to the back room. And as in the back family room, as I got into the room, here's Bob, who is probably at that time maybe 37, 38 years old, kneeling down to his 4-year-old son, asking for forgiveness for losing his temper. I have never witnessed that before in my life. But something, and Sue was smiling quietly next to us, standing. But the intimacy of watching a father seek forgiveness from his son at the age of 4, I'll never forget. That's been since 1962, 63 maybe. People like that. Then later on, we talked maybe a couple hours, had dinner and so forth, and later on about 9 o'clock, 9:30, they started winking at each other. We knew they wanted us to go home. We refused to go home. Finally we said, we think we should stay 1 o'clock or something, guys? I don't know. We feel pretty comfortable here. And Bob would go, But we went home. We knew better. But couples like that have enriched my priesthood in so many ways. Then the age of around 1973, 74 is interesting. I met a couple named Greg and Karen. He was a chemist, and she was a former school teacher, but she had 6 kids together from 2 years old to 14. And they told us about date night. It was their purple passion night. We said, what? Well, they had a purple pen. Now, you have calendars in your family, Mike? Yeah. It's in the kitchen someplace, I presume? Yes. Okay. And they had a color for each child, you know, from 2 to 14, who had what's going on, what school had, what with their mom or something at school. And they had a purple pen only used for them. Every Thursday night was date night. Only 2 things could knock off their date night. If the Pope called, number 1, he never called, or if Christmas happened on the Thursday, they'd make it the Friday. Always was Thursday. They did this religiously because they knew they had to be close together as a couple before they could give the love to the children. I've told that story to every engaged couple I've ever prepared for marriage. And it's real. If you don't have 3 to 4 dates rolling on your calendar, I'm sorry, you're full of crap. Oop. Well, anyway, it's interesting that calendars will tell you what's important to your family. Your calendar will tell you what's important to you and your spouse. If you're not in your calendar, okay, what you tell me, you're not important to yourselves. You always say, well, when there's time, right? Like maybe later on. Maybe you won't miss an anniversary, hopefully. But we don't do dates. And many times people would come to reconciliation. Usually the women who introduced the gift said, Father, my patience is so bad. I think I'm going to kill these kids one of these days. I said, how's your passion? He said, Father, I said patience. I said, I heard you. How's your passion? Who's got time for passion? Well, that's the other story that I love, that I was at a couple's house, Sal and Janine. They at an auction at Sacred Heart in Valley Park. I had raffled off one of my dinners, a spaghetti dinner, and 5 or 6 couples bought it. So we're down at their house one evening, and it was so funny that after dinner, the guys were talking and the gals were kind of in the kitchen, and we're kind of in a smaller area between the 2 family rooms, and they heard us talking. The guy said, Father, how can you get our wives to give us a little more sexual relationship time? Have you heard that before, guys? And so all of a sudden the gals go, oh, wait a minute here. And I started laughing. They said, when you guys start learning that love is 24 hours, not just a bedroom, a fantastic conversation took place. Because they said, if we're so worn out, many times I don't see you joining in with the diaper brigade time, or the cleaning of the bathtub time, or whatever it may be. And so help us out, and then it becomes much easier. And I challenged both of them to do that. What a special gift that night was. So we had talked about date night. They put the date night in their calendar. And all of a sudden his father calls. I found out 2 or 3 days later after this date night was put in their calendars. And he said, Tim, why don't you come over and help, blah, 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 blah. And Chrissy came out and said, you know what he did? He went with his father. He left our date to go fulfill his father's will. And I said, Tim, was it really an emergency? Like, it was going to rain the next morning that you had to get the hay in, or was the cow break through the fence? So you had to, you can't wait to say, well, I have a date tonight, wait till 10:30 tonight. You can't do that. He says, no. I said, then you gave something away that you already had marked out. You can't give it away. I said, normally what people tell me, if it's already given away, you see, I can't do it tonight, but I can do it tomorrow. I can do this time on Saturday or Sunday morning. Is that okay? But I can't do it tonight. And so that took place in 1991-92. And then they stayed in the parish. They had 2 little girls. And about 2002, 2003, it was Valentine's Day, was on a Sunday. And we had a life teen mass at Sacred Heart in Valley Park where I was pastor. So I saw them walk in. I said, hey, I'm going to talk about date night tonight, Valentine's Day. So great. So after Mass finished, I finished my homily and everything else, and walking out of church. And Tim and Chrissy come by me, and they said, Chrissy says, Father Rosy, I'm going to tell you a story. Tim has not missed a date night in 12 years. Not because he loves me, but you scared the hell out of him. And I said, you know, it worked. A special gift. Charlie and Zelda Sacred Heart Parish in Valley Park. I celebrated their 75th wedding anniversary. They were so tender. When I met him in 1988 as the beginning pastor, he introduced himself one day and says, "My nickname is Nicodemus." I said, "Oh, Charlie, it really is?" Just, yeah. I became baptized at the age of 81. Now he was 86, 87. Wow. And so the time, I guess it was probably someplace around 2000, 2001, Charlie and Zelda, Charlie had a tumor on his brain, and he fell down the stairs. They discovered it that way, and they had to put him into a nursing home eventually. And so Zelda came up to the parish office one day, and she said, "Father Rosy, I cannot contribute any more money on Sunday like I have for the last 75 years, the parish." She said, "Because extra money is needed for some medicine that I can't afford to do away with." And I said, "You've been giving so faithfully for the 70, my Lord, how can you worry about that?" She said, "But I'm going to make a quilt for you for the fall festival." She made this quilt, and it was full of crosses, like 9 crosses, 3 down, 3 down, 3 down in the middle of it. So beautiful. She used some of his ties that he had for the crosses. And I said to Monica, who was the secretary, I said, "I'm going to buy $50 worth of tickets. I'm going to get this. I'll force myself to get, usually they sell 300 tickets. I said, I get 1 out of 6 chance. You know, it's pretty good odds." I did not win it. Monica took 1 chance. She won it. And she gave it to me. She knew how much I wanted that quilt. And so after I had to go to the Holy Land the next day after the fall festival, and I came back and I said, "Zelda," I said, I won the quilt. I didn't tell her it was handed on. She said, "Well, Father, each of those crosses stand for a part of my marriage. When our grandson committed suicide, we walked together with that. That was one time. When Charlie was very sick and put into a nursing home to rehab for a while, that's another cross. When I broke my hip and couldn't walk for a while, that's another cross we walked." She named every cross, and I was in tears, moved so many ways by the power of that love that they had for each other, walked through good times and bad times and difficult times. Wow. The gift of sacrament of matrimony. I think of Sam and Liz, and we did the part of Mary's Encounter, and Matt knows this. I'm going to say about 10, 15 years ago, the Languages of Love. There's a book called Languages of Love. How many have seen that book? How many read it? Guys, you better get it. I have the names there, but they talk about languages of love. It's words of affirmation, quality time, receiving gifts, acts of service, and physical touch. It was fascinating because Sam and Liz have been married maybe 30 years, 28 years. Say 28 years, I think it's 43 years, 44 coming up shortly. And it's interesting that they did this little exercise they do in this little book. It's fascinating that here's Sam, who's trying to tell his wife all the years of marriage that all through acts of service. He would cook the dinners most of the time. He would do outside the gardening. All kind of things make the place beautiful and special, all around the house. Liz wants a hug. She wants tender moments. She wants conversation. Sam's an introvert, very quiet. He sit and smile like a Cheshire cat for a long time. But she wants to hug. And until they did this, they didn't quite understand the language of love that was primary for them. They didn't understand that the person was not the same way as they were. They thought they were being received in a powerful way, but their needs were primarily different. How many of us realize, we say, well, that's just the way I am. I'm an introvert, I'm quiet, I don't do that kind of stuff. Well, if you're in communication with somebody, you better listen. If you don't, intimacy that you could be experiencing is not going to be as deep or as rich. And all of a sudden, Sam's eyeballs just opened up and they began to listen and express himself in the ways that Liz needed and vice versa. She saw the way he was trying to show her in many ways too. It's awesome. I remember a few years ago when I was in a parish, and this guy named Bob, I forgot his wife's name, and he was a CFO of a small business company. He was working 60 hours a week. He had three children, one about 6th grade, one about 4th grade, and one at 3 or 4 years old, I think it was. And he was, another company bought him out. He lost his job. And when you're a CFO of a big, good-sized company, you go Zippo, nobody wants to hire you because you're too high salary, or going to expect a high salary, and they don't even want to interview you. And so he was off for 1 month, 2 months. I think he's there like March of the year he was laid off. April, May, June. He started taking his kids to school, pick them up. His wife got a job, and she was working someplace. Stayed the whole summer with them, all September, October. And he told me about the last, I guess, August and September, he said, you know, Rosy, the whole perspective of my marriage and family life has changed. I said, why? He says, I was so nervous, so antsy, so restless the first 3 or 4 months. I was self-depressed because my self-image was kind of crashing, that I wasn't producing like I used to be all the time. And I had many interviews the last couple of months. I told him no. I said, what's going on? He said, I want to be in charge of my life now instead of a company. I want to spend time with my wife and children. I got to know them in the last 6 or 8 months where he was off work in ways I never knew before. That's my priority. He got a job, and he's doing fine, and he defined the parameters, and they wanted him for that time. He was very successful. Wow, wow. The final examples is a friend of mine, Father Pat Malone, a classmate of mine who was 82 this year, just last week. He has a classmate of his friends and friends of mine now in Denver, named Ron and Katie. And Katie was the most beautiful, active woman in the church. Ron and her did all kinds of things. When the Pope came to Denver, she was in charge of getting places for the kids to sleep. All of Denver, I don't know how many thousands and millions of people they had there, but she was in charge of, with a group of people, in charge of all the housing. They used parking lots with sleeping bags, those 4 or 5 floors, parking lots. They had no parking for 2 days or 3 days, and they had, the kids could sleep on there with little tents or on there and their sleeping bags. Well, she has Alzheimer's. The last 3 years I've seen her. And to see Ron and Katie, Ron minister to her, hour after hour, gentleness and kindness, and Katie will always forget everything immediately after she asks it, because old stuff she remembers, but present stuff, like, what do you want to eat? And you tell her, and she goes, what do you want to eat? And then she say, well, you want to eat something? And all of a sudden, I saw watch him interact with her, such a tenderness. And the sacrament of matrimony is coming through. Another friends of mine, Phyllis and Norm, the couple I worked with since '73, in dialogue with them still, and yet Phyllis has some signs of that same thing, of Alzheimer's. And the first time I walked away grieving that who I knew is no longer existing in the same form that I've known for 47 years. And yet I came back afterwards and I said, I'm going to keep on going regardless, and whatever happens, happens. And I see a new thing of the sacrament of matrimony that I never saw before inside the relationship. Maybe outside I've seen people have Alzheimer's for a long time, but but not in the middle of the relationship that we formed as a threesome since 1973. So that's what I see in the sacrament of matrimony, from crosses to laughter and joys. And they talk about the Spirit, the angels taking care of you, And I remember in the seminary, I was in 1966, I called it the year of my pearl, when I went from slime of, which is pearl is a slime, by the way. You know that? Did you know that? It's the slime. You didn't know that? It's a pearl is a temple built by pain around a grain of sand. A pearl is a temple built by pain around a grain of sand. What pains have built your body, and what are the grains of sand? A pearl, a piece of sand piece, gets into the oyster, irritates the muscle. Continue doing this, and the slime becomes the pearl. Not the sand. It keeps irritating the muscle, and the pearl is formed. And that summer, when I quit the seminary, 90 times a day times 90 days. And I never forget that my own question of my own priesthood, to be, my running away from life and marriage, or just trying to hide in the seminary. My leadership level as gifts had not emerged yet, because my self-confidence was not there yet. And my spiritual director, there was 6 of us living down in Pruitt-Igoe, besides myself, and Father Shockley. And then my spiritual director, Father Bill Lyons, maybe you know Bill Lyons from the college, quite a guy. Rosy, let's get together, with other guys you're with. I'm going, you think they have these? Just call them and talk to them. Well, I'm too embarrassed to even tell them right out loud. I would say, hey, Tom, can you come on Monday night? Would you say Monday night, but have Bill Lyons is coming. Can you meet with me? And find out all of us had the same issues. All of us had the same things. And so after we met for about 8 weeks that summer, and I said, maybe I should leave the seminary and then think about priesthood later. He says, Rosy, you stay in the seminary at least a quarter, if not the whole semester. Then you leave from inside, not from outside. It's too easy to walk away outside. So I said, okay, I'm not going to study. You try to outdo the Lord. And I find out that I went to, and Webster College was right next with me, half a mile away. And so you could go to any college a presentation or outside speaker at Webster College with no cost. So I'd walk over there at least once a week for the first 8 weeks. No matter what talk I heard, what I heard was be a priest. It's interesting. You go to how you build blocks in Africa. It was build a priest. It could be something economically in India. I heard be a priest. It was amazing. But what the topic was, all I heard was be a priest. I think this Holy Spirit works that way in our own lives as couples. Sometimes you may go to a talk that has nothing to do with your relationship. All of a sudden, all you hear is, I ought to bring this up because something relates to something, and the Spirit is talking to us. I remember one couple with marriage encounter to a convention I was with, I think it was Amherst up in Boston, Maine, I guess, Boston or someplace, Maine, I guess. And they were saying, and I went to the same talk they did on economics and something or other, they heard sexuality. I said, pardon me? Well, we heard this, and I started laughing and smiling because I'm thinking, I'm a part of that. It's like, what you need to hear, you'll hear. And the Spirit kind of draws out of you, and it may not have nothing with the topic, but what you hear through some kind of a networking filter system, that happens.